Identity politics and semantics is absolutely sinking the left, and changing our language is going to also be necessary in our strategy moving forward to win in it. That is in part because of the Overton window. So the original Overton window was actually more thought of like this, right? So everything in the center is common sense, things that just everybody agrees on. Everything out here would be considered cordial, regular political debate with differences, right? But then out here would be considered fringe, things nobody would say, or things that nobody would consider actual viable public policy. So for this next part, I want you to comment any public policy or issue you're concerned about in the comments, and then I will use how I would use language to change the way people think about it. But anyways, I have talked before about how one way to change the Overton window is to kind of pull to the fringe, right, and say the crazy thing. But another thing that Republicans are really good at is using statements that are vague that can mean more than one thing to a different group of people. And you can pull these people here and these people here because of it. An example I use with Donald Trump all the time is when he said, we're going to build a wall along the Mexican border. The lowest information, most racist people, the underbelly of the Republican Party, thought to themselves he meant a physical wall brick by brick across the Mexican border. But the more intellectuals that were more kind of in that center thought that it was more metaphoric, as in we're going to have more border security, right? And we've seen this continuation of the Overton window shifting through all of his immigration policy, right? Because he starts to conflate words. So we talk about illegals, and then undocumented, which isn't necessarily the same as illegals. And then we start to bring in words like cartel, Venezuelan, until we know now that he is actually deporting people that are here legally. Republican politics now only does 4 things, and one of those things is to leverage bias. There is always going to be attacks on specific groups in this country, and it's awful, right? I do not agree with that. But the left's response is to double down into these niche identity politics and, for example, focus incredibly hard on the trans thing and focus incredibly hard on immigration and Hispanics, right? But what they should be doing is understanding that every one of those is actually the same issue, and that is a political machine leveraging bias and creating bias with disinformation, misinformation, what have you. And if you think about just combating that as a whole, instead of focusing on each group, we actually have a better chance of freeing everybody. And the semantic side of that, in this very, very specific language that we like to use when we're trying to be inclusive, sometimes hurts us because, for example, I hear the word ableism used incorrectly all the time, so much into the fact that it's almost bastardized people that are disabled in or I was presenting information about organ donation, and I used the phrase harvesting organs, and somebody said I should never ever say that, that's disrespectful to the families, the this, the that, and the entire system I was talking about was an incredibly inequitable system, right, where certain people are going to have a privilege in accessing donated organs while as marginalized communities are not, right? And so I think we would agree that what's important is changing the system so that there's equity in our healthcare and removing racism and misogyny from it. But because we care so much about feelings and semantics, the entire conversation shifted, and it was only about whether I should use the word harvest or not. And it also will begin to train us that everything is connected, right? Because one of the reasons we lost votes when people didn't want to vote because of Gaza is because they said, well, look, there's all these other people's rights that are also going to be in jeopardy, right? And so in my head, if somebody's strategizing wanting to fix the problem in Gaza, I knew because of the powers that be that there's no way to elect somebody that's 100% anti-Israel or 100% wanting a 2-state system, whatever, without electing somebody that isn't pro-Israel first. It's going to be a long process. And I explained that, look, if we get abortion on the ballot, for example, we're going to get more people to vote. If we get certain, voter ID things that are on the ballot and we vote against it, more people are going to show up to vote. If more people show up to vote to preserve the rights of themselves and those around them, then what happens is we might have a system that is more equitable in the future, meaning that we are saving our voting rights so things aren't so redistricted and the voting system so inequitable next time that we can't slowly move the Overton window and get what we want overseas. And when you start to think of everybody being connected, it's so much easier to lift up any group. We saw, for example, a horrendous attack on trans people in this country during this election. It was a hate crime, in my opinion. And the way I view it is this: they know the visceral reaction we're going to have, and then we're going to focus on that one issue, and we're going to kind of piecemeal it instead of creating an apparatus that protects everybody's rights and everybody's identity. And then it helps us to work together on things, because remember, the other thing I said is a lot of people are like, oh, what group was that you said wrote this bill? It doesn't matter anymore if it's APEC, Heritage Foundation, ALEC, or Moms for Liberty, because they have all already decided that they're going to operate as a conglomerate. They have people that are in 3 of these organizations. They meet all the time. They are one big blob, whereas the left is still trying to, preserve themselves based on identity, and it's not working. If we all work together, we can lift everybody up.